Hi, welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. Today, we're wrapping up this theme, this topic of building on our connections. Today, I have my wife, Joann, with us today to share her insight on this topic. I really appreciate her coming in, as sometimes, life happens and you have to reschedule. But at the same time, she came in last minute, and I really appreciate her coming on and just sharing the discussion, because building on connections doesn't usually, sometimes you don't have a schedule for it. Sometimes something just happens. So thank you, Joann.
Let me try that again. Sure, no problem. Glad I can help.
Usually it helps to be unmuted to connect. Just joking. But anyway, with those listening around the world, I just want to share, despite it, connection seems like a safe area. A lot of people maybe listening are not doing so well. So I want to encourage you to find what appropriate help you can get. In the United States, is 1-800-273-8255. It's National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Wherever you are around the world, I do encourage you to find what resources they are. Sometimes it may seem like they're little, but resources come in all shapes and sizes. And it's unique to your personality and to what needs you may have. With that being said, last month, as we close off February, was Martin Luther King Day. A lot of us in the States remember, or at least reflect from what we heard about his life. But one of the things that he did well was he had good quotes. He had good things that he said that I find very insightful, especially in regards to building in our connections. He has a quote that says, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality." What comes to mind when you hear this, Joann?
Well, I guess I'm focusing a lot on the first part, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And it makes me think of how, I don't know, how something that can happen to one person, maybe you feel like it doesn't affect you, that it doesn't touch you because it's not you, or it's not a person from your group, or no one from your friends, but it can still touch you. It can still affect you in some way, probably in a way you don't expect. And also how, with the second part, how we are all connected. Mm-hmm. We, as I've heard you say, we are not islands. Mm-hmm. We are not lone wolves. We belong in a pack, or at least we have that sense of belonging.
Yes, and some of the descriptions of those groups could be a community. Sometimes our community could be just our small group, but it doesn't really. But when we think about a community, it's something that's intertwined, it's something that's interconnected, just like Martin Luther King is saying here. I think it's very wise words, because at the same time, a lot of us could say, well, I barely know the person. How, it shouldn't bother them, but it's interesting how in life you begin to see, at least from my experience, that even if you are indirectly or not very close to the person, maybe a coworker or someone you see regularly but you don't really share your life with, it does impact. And for some who are really struggling, it can be overwhelming, because the idea that um, it won't affect those around us can can sometimes make us feel that what we do, how we treat ourselves, what we do to ourselves, what we don't do to ourselves doesn't affect anyone. But in this quote, as we kind of continue on this topic, it does suggest the latter, that it does affect all of us. I always say this: life is best lived shared. You know, a community, a family, a church family, a group, whatever you're part of, those moments are ones you really remember, at least from people I've been around. I like to game, but I find that, a lot of the enjoyment of, these experiences, whether it's video games, whether it's just, going on a trip, going overseas, I think this life is best lived shared is important. We can immerse ourselves into a story, but that involves even a fictional character that we kind of connect to. Dale Carnegie says it this way, and he says, "You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years trying to get others people interested in you." I want to hear what speaks to you when you hear this. I feel that a lot of us, including myself, have to be reminded of this, especially with how many ways we could connect, and how sometimes we put so much weight on that being our means to gain friends or gain connections. So when you read this, when you see this quote, it's on the screen, what comes to mind? What pops into your mind, Joann?
Well, I think of, if I want a friend, do I want a person who is interested in me, interested in hearing what I have to say, and interested in getting to know me? Or am I going to go for someone who's only interested in themselves? Someone who's just all about themselves? I'll probably go for someone who wants to get to know me.
Yeah.
So I guess it's one of those things that may seem like a given, but we all forget at some point in our lives.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a point indirectly. You want the person to want to ask, and that are interested in your story, your life. What does that make you feel when someone's interested in your story or what you're doing, at the very least?
Well, it makes me feel that I'm heard, that I'm special, that I'm worth the attention.
And I want one of the words you said, "I'm heard." A lot of times I've spoken to people, and they say the hardest thing is feeling heard. Whether you're in a support group, one of the chief complaints from my experience is not being heard. Support groups are a way for people in a safe place to feel heard and not feel judged, not feel ridiculed, not be told what they should have done. There's been a lot of success and healing through these avenues of support. So there's something about sharing and hearing people's stories that kind of fertilize the idea of connections. Like you said, if someone just tells about themselves how much they have done, but puts no interest in what you have done, that usually doesn't inspire people to connect. It just shows, even as impressive as a person's accomplishments are, and even if you could confirm these accomplishments, I believe it's a Pratt study. If someone seems so perfect, you're less drawn to them because you don't feel that you could connect, because you're and I feel that can be more of a stumbling block. No matter if you have good things to say, no matter how inspiring your accomplishments are, is being able to be human and just be heard, and also hear people and listen to people, I feel can be the first steps to the connection. And we talk about stories. I know you know how to say these words better than I, so I'm going to ask you, Joann, to say this word from the Italian word. I know I'll butcher it, but could you?
My guess is commuovere.
It's better than what I was going to say. So basically, it's to be moved in a heartwarming way, usually relating to a story that moved you to tears. Being moved in a heartwarming way doesn't always mean it's sad. A lot of times it means many different things. I mean, it could be a wonderful, tears of joy, those kind of wonderful moments in the story. When someone whose chips were against, they were not supposed to survive, or they're not supposed to be successful in the grand scheme of things. In America, we love the idea of the underdog. We love when underdogs can prevail. We kind of started off as colonies as the underdogs, so it is deep-seated. But I think there's something intrinsically common and kind of inspiring to see someone who doesn't have everything stacked for them, but still be able to move forward. And I know we didn't speak about this before, but I think sometimes in connections we look at strength the wrong way. I'm strong because I have these strong, impressive stories, or am I strong because I'm vulnerable? Am I strong because I'm putting myself out there and I'm not sure if I'm going to be rejected or not? Am I strong because I'm just going to be like, I'm going to say this and I could be rejected? There's no guarantee, but I'm going to put myself out there because I believe I want to try. And I feel those stories are inspiring. Black History Month is this month, and we think about people like Rosa Parks who stood firm. Think about the woman who had her son casket open after her son was brutally murdered in I believe it's Mississippi. I don't remember the actual names. It was in the south, mm-hmm. But it was beginnings of the civil rights. I don't really go into with Revive Ministries. It's really I don't like going into politics and these kind of things, but I would say when it comes to human decency, when it comes to hope, when it comes to inspiring and connecting, I can't help but mention these stories, these inspiring stories. And in South Africa, there's a word called Ubuntu.
Ubuntu?
Yeah. Well, it's roughly translated as I find my worth in you, and you find your worth in me. It's amazingly connective. It goes back to how Martin Luther King felt we are directly or indirectly affected. And I feel there's also a sense of responsibility and accountability on our parts. And I feel as a community that is connecting, there is a sense of accountability, but accountability in a way to be better. Building on our connections means many different things to people. What does this topic, building on our connections, mean to you, Joann? And why is it important for us, especially today?
Well, I feel that with everything we have at our disposal, I feel that our connections have become weaker as opposed to stronger. I remember as a kid, just going outside and feeling that there was some sense of community. Whereas nowadays, it's there, but I guess it's not as noticeable as before.
Yeah.
And also, for me personally, connections, like building connections, or I guess just social interactions, have been quite a challenge for me. Growing up, I barely had any opportunities to socialize outside of school and church. And I grew up with, my father would work very hard and be away from home a lot. He'd call home every night. So like communication's there, but yeah, he did the best he could to provide for us. And my mom was busy with my older sister who has autism and is nonverbal. So I guess I could say that I grew up with very little social interactions compared with my peers. And yeah, connecting has been and is still a challenge for me. Yet I'm on my journey.
Thank you for sharing. It's not easy to share, but also I do want to also, those who are listening, watching, to note that we can only share what we only experience, and when it comes to connections, no one, it's not something we're inherently born with, and for me, I would say I am more surprised that people are able or even inspiring to connect better. Everything's very easy today. Life is hard. Not trying to minimize people's experience or my wife's experience or anything like that. All I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of reasons or excuses we can make for ourselves to not connect. Not to say one family had it better or one took more time. They may have, but the choice really ultimately comes to the person himself, or herself. Does she want to connect better with the people surrounding? No matter what context or where they grew up, doesn't matter. It matters today. I think a lot of times when we look back, especially when I was young, there's a lot of things that were unclear of what connection means. What is, how do you connect well? Because everyone's context is different. Everyone's ability. Some people are more comfortable being alone. But does that mean that we stay there? Sometimes we misinterpret comfort as the right path, but sometimes I would try to encourage those to be a little uncomfortable at times. It's not trying to be something you're not, but understanding that the external things that happen in your life, and it's never easy. And whatever guests come on to this podcast, I never minimize their experience. But external things happen to all of us. Can we say that? But how we see them is the difference. And what do we do after? Not to say or minimize those who are around the world who are suffering, who don't have the basic needs of food, family, environment, those who don't have any natural support or positive factors in their lives to say, I matter. So for me, that's why if we're dependent on those things, because we're not all given the same deck of cards. I remember one of my guests once said, it's not about it having the good hand, it's about playing a bad hand well. Sometimes we have our hands and we could look at our situation as singular, and as everyone else knows how to connect and communicate much better than us. But I encourage you not to go down that route, because not to say some of it may be true, but I would say it's less helpful today. If we're really being honest, our relationships are usually modeled by the people closest to us, and they tried their best. Unfortunately, it's hard. People get hurt around, whether they're young adolescents, they get hurt, or later on as adults. But the sad thing about it is when hurt people sometimes end up hurting other people. But that doesn't have to stay there, and I do appreciate this platform to share, and this platform to have guests share some of the more uncomfortable moments of their life, but also understand that uncomfortable moment that they share is a step forward to connect. Because I feel, in a way, just like Martin Luther King said, these uncomfortable moments, we were just quiet. For me, that's scary. But people coming on this podcast are not quiet. They're sharing things that are not that can be more personal, and because they know this intrinsic idea that Martin Luther King says. Even though the person will never probably meet the person listening to this podcast or the next podcast or whoever is on this podcast, they know that what their story can impact another. And our hope is they'll impact them positively. One church lady, I forget her name, once told me that people are either blessings or lessons, whether you're faith-based or not. It's apparent that we can learn a lot from our connections. I want to kind of also say to those listening, and I'm gonna get your final thoughts, Joann, after this, that Joann said, my wife said, I'm working on my connections, but I realize it's a journey. There's a word, and I'm going to butcher it. Well, butcher the meaning for a lot of different Latin American countries. It's vacilando. And for me, I like to kind of imagine this definition is going out to the car and throwing your GPS in the backseat, throwing your map in the backseat, and just going for a drive. A lot of times when it comes to connections, it's hit or miss. There's some avenues some of us are very comfortable in connecting in, and some avenues we're not. But giving yourself, call it grace or patience, to kind of go through those steps, those little steps towards building and investing in connecting with the ones around you, knowing that even though despite how overwhelming you may be going, and that you can be better today. Joann, what have you learned in building on your connections, as you mentioned before, that you want to share as we wrap up? What would you like to share those listening today that has helped you? It could be one thing or just an idea.
Well, I understand that I'm an introvert. I'm pretty quiet. And for a long time, I was alone and I liked it. However, I'm not meant to stay there. And now, how you get out, well, maybe not get out, but how you can develop connections, like good, healthy ones, well, that's something I'm figuring out too. So I refuse to appear here like as though I have all the answers, because I don't. As I've said before, I'm on a journey. I'm on this journey. I'm learning all these things as I go. But what I can say is it's uncomfortable. There were many tears. But the important thing is to keep moving forward. Even if you fall flat in your face, it's forward.
Yeah. I remember before I mentioned just, we go for the underdogs. One of the most notable genres in American history, American movies or whatever, is Westerns. And if you ever watch some of the Westerns, you'll notice that the chips are usually not in their favor, but they do it because they believe in it. They believe in whatever the story is. They feel strongly about it. And there's something very inspiring about that. And my hopes with building connection, it's going to be uniquely tailored to the individual themselves. But I would say it will be inspiring to hear, those listening, that you will take the time, just like I am. I'm on this journey too, to invest in your connections with one another. Don't lower the bar because it's uncomfortable. A lot of this stuff is uncomfortable. When it comes to healing, when it comes to these interpersonal issues, there's a lot of pain, and sometimes the people that we struggle with the most are the ones that remind us most of ourselves. So with that being said, and I said it before, I want to say it again to those listening, this stuff may take time, and you may not see any improvements as a day-to-day. But whatever it is, as much as I don't know what it is or can't even understand what you're going through, I would say just try to be better today, whatever that looks like. If it means I'm gonna get up a little earlier or whatever, I'm gonna read this book. Your time is only valued if you value it yourself. No, and if you don't value your time, you're going to have a harder time connecting, because you don't allow yourself the room to even reflect on what has helped and what hasn't. And the last thing that I try to avoid is being bitter. It's okay to be angry. It doesn't make sense that we're going to get along with all of each other, but at the same time, it is, I would say, prudent, and I would encourage each one of us to try and find ways to be better at connecting and hearing one another. I want to say thank you, Joann, for being willing to share it today. And it's never easy. As simple as this topic, you read the words building on our connections, like, oh, that's a very general, but as you can see that it's very different, and how do you say, it's very different because each one of us are different. So thank you again, Joann. I want to tell those who are listening, remember to stay updated on all things Revive Ministries through all the various platforms. ReviveMinistriesFL.com is a website. I also want to encourage those, if you want to be on the podcast, you can email us at info@ReviveMinistriesFL.com. I'm always intrigued. I'm always trying to encourage those who are listening, who want to share their story. We have different themes each month, and you just email us, and we'll try to find what monthly theme will be the best fit. I want to say this has always been a wonderful experience to kind of have all these new, fresh guests. And also, on the other side, I like having returning guests, because that shows that we are building on our community and our connections. I want to say this is goodbye for now from Revive Ministries Podcast, leaving you with this last quote. It reads, think back for the most important experience of your life. The highest of highs, the greatest victories, the most daunting obstacles overcome. How many happened to you alone? I bet there are very few. When you understand that being connected to others is one of the life's greatest joys, you realize that life best comes when you initiate and invest in solid relationship. John C. Maxwell.